The great engine of the Aethelgard had been silent for exactly 100 years. 3 months and 4 days. To the Krellian Empire, this silence was not merely a mechanical failure. It was a spiritual wound, a gaping void in the heart of their most magnificent creation that whispered of incompetence with every passing second. The chamber housing the core was large enough to swallow a terrestrial city whole, a cathedral of white alloy and floating data ribbons that shimmered with the cold, unyielding light of 1,000 containment fields. The air here was scrubbed so clean, it tasted metallic, sterile, and utterly dead. It smelled of ozone and despair, a scent that Ronin recognized the moment he stepped off the transport shuttle. He adjusted the heavy canvas strap of his tool bag, the coarse fabric scratching against the neck of his grease-stained coveralls. The weight on his shoulder was familiar, a comfort in a place that seemed designed to make him feel small. He felt woefully out of place, a smudge of dirt on a pristine canvas. He wasn't wearing the flowing, anti-static silk robes that draped the slender frames of the Krellian high-caste engineers. He was wearing faded gray fatigues with a patch of the Terran engineering corps stitched haphazardly onto the shoulder, the threads fraying at the edges. He was human, a species the Krellian High Council considered barely evolved. A race of primates fit only for lifting heavy crates, mining unstable asteroids, or serving as fodder in the border wars. Yet, here he was, walking down the central gantry of the sacred core, surrounded by the galaxy's greatest minds, who looked at him as if he were a bacteria that had somehow developed the ability to walk upright. Overseer Vrak led the way, his footsteps making no sound on the polished floor. Vrak was tall, even for a Krellian, his elongated skull emphasizing the arrogance that seemed to radiate from him like heat. His violet eyes, wide and unblinking, narrowed with disdain every time he glanced back at the human trailing behind him. "Walk faster, human!" Vrak snapped, his voice a sibilant hiss that echoed unpleasantly in the vast chamber. The High Council's patience is thinner than the atmosphere of a dead moon. Bringing a primitive into the sacred core is an act of desperation I still advise against. If it were up to me, you would be scrubbing the waste recyclers, not breathing the air of the Aethelgard. Ronin didn't look up at the alien. His eyes were fixed on the floor plates, his boots thudding heavily with a rhythm that disrupted the perfect silence. He was listening. He was always listening. Even through the soles of his boots, he was trying to feel the ship's heartbeat, searching for the subtle vibrations of the auxiliary power that kept the lights on while the main heart slept. "If you guys could fix it with advanced calculus and polite conversation, Vrak, I wouldn't be here," Ronin said, his voice rough, sounding like gravel tumbling in a cement mixer compared to the musical lilt of the Krellian language. "You've had a century. Maybe it's time to stop thinking and start working." Vrak stopped so abruptly that Ronin almost walked into him. The alien spun around, his skin shimmering like polished obsidian as his temper flared. "You are here only because Lady Elara invoked the archaic rites of assistance," Vrak spat, the name tasting like bile in his mouth. "Do not mistake her curiosity for respect. You have one rotation. If the engine does not wake, you will be jettisoned out of the nearest airlock. Do you understand, Ronin?" Ronin stopped walking and shifted the bag to his other shoulder. They had finally reached the central platform, a circular dais suspended over a chasm of machinery that stretched down into the dark. Looming above them was the core, a sphere of dark matter and crystalline alloy, suspended in a complex magnetic web. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. It was a masterpiece of design, a sculpture of physics made manifest, and it was dead. It was a tomb. Standing at the primary console, bathed in the soft glow of holographic readouts that showed nothing but flat lines, was Lady Elara. She was different from Vrak. Her obsidian skin held faint, bioluminescent patterns of teal that pulsed softly, matching the rhythm of her own respiration. She turned as they approached, her gaze sweeping over Ronin not with disgust, but with a profound, exhausting sadness. She was the chief architect, the descendant of the engineers who had built this failure, and she carried the weight of 100 years of shame on her slender shoulders. "Is this him?" Elara asked, her voice melodic, vibrating in the upper registers of sound that tickled human ears. She looked at the grease on his face, the calluses on his hands, the utter lack of reverence in his posture. "This is the human mechanic, Ronin," Vrak introduced him, spitting the name like a curse word. "He brings primitive tools, and an even more primitive attitude. Ronin dropped his heavy bag onto the pristine white floor. The sound was a loud, jarring clang that echoed sacrilegiously through the silent chamber. Several engineers working on nearby gantries gasped audibly, clutching their data pads as if he had just slapped a child. Ronin ignored them, wiping a smudge of oil from his cheek with the back of his hand. "Hi," he said, offering a lopsided grin that was entirely too casual for the setting. "Nice paperweight you got there. Big shiny. Does it do anything other than look expensive?" Elara stepped forward, her movements fluid and aquatic, gliding rather than walking. She halted inches from him, close enough that Ronin could smell her scent. It was intoxicating, like rain hitting hot pavement mixed with crushed lilacs and static electricity. For a moment, the vast difference in their species didn't matter. There was a spark, a curiosity that bridged the gap between the stars. She studied his face, looking for the intelligence that her calculations said shouldn't exist in his genome. "They say humans possess an intuitive chaos," Elara said softly, her large eyes locking onto his. "My people have run 99 trillion simulations. We have accounted for every variable in the known universe. We have checked the quantum flux, the dimensional folding, the gravitational constants. Everything is perfect, and yet, it does not work. Why do you think you can succeed where the collective Krellian intellect has failed for a century?" Ronin looked up at the massive silent engine. He didn't see the equations scrolling on the holographic displays. He didn't see the quantum variables or the theoretical physics. He saw a machine that was tired. He saw a machine that was holding its breath, waiting for permission to exhale. "Because," Ronin said, his voice dropping to a serious register, losing the mockery, "sometimes you stop listening to the math, and you start listening to the metal. You guys treat this thing like a god. You're afraid of it. You worship it. But it's not a god, Elara. It's a machine. It wants to run. It just needs someone to ask it nicely. Can I touch it?" Vrak stepped forward to protest, his hand moving toward the alarm panel. But Elara held up a long, elegant hand. Her teal markings pulsed brighter, signaling command. "Proceed," she said, "but be warned, Ronin. The energy residue within the casing alone can vaporize organic matter if the shielding is compromised. We scan it remotely for a reason." "I'll take my chances," Ronin muttered. He walked toward the housing of the Singularity Drive. The scale of it was humbling. Standing at the base of the injector assembly, he felt like an ant looking up at a mountain. He placed his bare hand on the cold, smooth alloy. The Krellian engineers gasped again, horror rippling through the room. Touching the holy engine with flesh was unheard of. But Ronin closed his eyes. To the Krellians, engineering was a visual and cerebral art. They looked at screens. They modeled reality in virtual space. But humans felt. Humans evolved hunting in the dark, sensing the snap of a twig, the shift in the wind, the tremor of the earth. Ronin extended his senses, pushing past the cold metal, searching for the vibration. He stood there for an hour. Then two, he didn't move. He didn't speak. He just breathed. His hands splayed against the casing, his head bowed. The Krellians began to murmur. Vrak was pacing back and forth, his impatience growing like a storm cloud. "He is doing nothing," Vrak shouted, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "He is merely sleeping standing up. This is a mockery of our science. He is a charlatan, Lady Elara. We must remove him." Elara watched Ronin intently. She noticed the slight twitch in his fingers, the way his breathing had synchronized with the low hum of the auxiliary gravity generators. She felt a strange pull toward him, an inexplicable fascination. It wasn't logical, it wasn't scientific, but seeing this small, fragile human standing against the backdrop of their greatest failure stirred something in her chest. Hope, or perhaps something more dangerous, attraction. She moved closer to the console, overriding the security protocols that Vrak was trying to activate. "Give him time, Vrak!" she commanded, her voice steel wrapped in silk. "He has wasted centuries of our time in mere hours," Vrak argued, his face turning a darker shade of violet. Suddenly, Ronin opened his eyes. He didn't turn around. He walked to the left side of the casing, where a massive conduit fed plasma into the injector assembly. He pressed his ear against the metal, looking like a doctor trying to hear the heartbeat of a leviathan. Thrum, thrum, click, thrum. There it was. A microscopic hesitation, a dissonance in the symphony. A note that was slightly flat. "You guys replaced the flux couplers, right?" Ronin asked, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Vrak scoffed, throwing his hands up. "We have replaced every component 3 times over. The couplers are aligned to within a nanometer of perfection. They are machined to tolerances your primitive mind cannot even comprehend. That's your problem, Ronin muttered, stepping back. He walked back to his bag, his boots clomping purposefully. It's too perfect, it's too tight. The plasma can't breathe. It's choking on your perfection. He knelt down and unzipped the canvas bag. The Krellian engineers leaned over the railings, their large eyes wide with morbid curiosity. What advanced human technology would he reveal? A quantum destabilizer? A zero-point energy siphon? A gravitational lens? Ronin pulled out a hammer. It wasn't a plasma cutter. It wasn't a sonic drill. It was a ball-peen hammer with a hickory handle worn smooth by years of sweat and grip, the wood dark with oil and age. The head was scarred steel, chipped and dented from 1,000 jobs on 1,000 worlds. It looked like an artifact from the Stone Age compared to the sleek, floating technology surrounding them. Vrak let out a bark of incredulous laughter, a sound of pure disbelief. A stick with a rock on the end? This is his solution? Guard! Remove him before he scratches the paint. This is an insult to the Empire. Wait, Elara's voice was sharp, cutting through Vrak's hysteria. She looked at Ronin, and for the first time, Ronin looked back with a grin that was all confidence and reckless human charm. It was the kind of grin that made bad ideas sound like fun. The kind of grin that built civilizations and destroyed worlds. Trust me, Ronin said to her. 2 words, simple, heavy, and in that moment, Elara did. It defied all logic. It went against her conditioning, her education, her entire worldview. But she nodded. Let him work, she said, her voice deadly calm. The teal patterns on her skin flared with intense light, a warning to Vrak and the guards. Ronin didn't flinch. He walked back to the injector assembly. He planted his feet wide. He took a deep breath, centering himself. He wasn't just going to hit it blindly. He was calculating the exact point of stress. He needed to create a shockwave that would travel through the alloy, jarring the microscopic misalignment just enough to let the seals settle naturally into a groove that the math couldn't predict. He raised the hammer. If you strike that console, I will have you executed. Vrak screamed, drawing a plasma pistol from his belt. Elara moved faster than thought. She drew her own weapon, a sleek silver device, and leveled it at Vrak's head. The entire room froze. The silence was absolute. I said let him work, Elara whispered. Ronin didn't look back at the drama. He focused. He became one with the hammer. He visualized the plasma flow, the tiny catch in the coupler, the stubborn atom that refused to yield to logic. Swish! Clang! The sound was deafening in the silence, metal on metal, a pure ringing note that seemed to hang in the air for an eternity. The engineers cringed. Ronin didn't stop. He moved a foot to the right. Clang! He moved to the lower casing. Clang! He is destroying it! A random engineer wailed from the upper gantry. Ronin ignored them. He was in the zone. It was a rhythm, a heartbeat. He was playing the engine like a drum, forcing the rigid Krellian perfection to yield to human adaptability. Bam, bam, bam! He swung with a strength that belied his size. The muscles in his arms corded and tense. Sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes. But he felt the shift. On the third strike, the vibration under his boots changed. The dissonance was gone. The hesitation smoothed out. He lowered the hammer. He was breathing hard. He wiped his forehead with the back of his sleeve, leaving another streak of grease, and turned to Elara. Try it now. Vrak was trembling with rage, his weapon still trained on Ronin, despite Elara's aim. You fool, you primitive ape! You have likely shattered the crystal matrix. When I run the diagnostics and prove you have failed, I will personally vaporize you where you stand. Initiate the start sequence, Elara interrupted, her eyes never leaving Ronin's face. She holstered her weapon, a gamble of infinite stakes. My lady, it is dangerous, Vrak stammered. Do it, she screamed, her voice cracking with the strain of a century. Elara's fingers flew across the holographic interface. The sequence began. The room dimmed as power was diverted from the station to the ship. Deep inside the core, a light began to glow. Not the cold, sterile light of the containment field, but a warm, angry orange, the color of a waking star. The color of life! Brrr. The sound started low, a rumble in the chest that vibrated through the floor plates. Then it rose, a whine, a roar, a scream of power being unleashed. The gantries began to shake. Vrak clutched the railing, his mouth opening in shock, his pistol clattering to the floor. The diagnostic screens, which had shown flat lines for 100 years, suddenly exploded with data. Bars shot up from red to green. Efficiency 10%, 40%, 85%, 100%. Impossible. Vrak whispered, his knees buckling. The variables, they are stabilizing. The flux is harmonious. It is perfect. The great engine of the Aethelgard, silent for a century, roared to life with a sound that shook the very stars. It was a song of triumph, a melody of physics and brute force singing in harmony. The cheers didn't start immediately. There was a moment of stunned silence. The Krellians stared at the monitors, then at the spinning core, and finally, at the human wiping grease on his pants. Then, the roar of approval matched the engine. Engineers were hugging each other. Some were weeping openly, purple tears streaming down their cheeks. Vrak stood frozen, his worldview shattering in real time, unable to comprehend that a stick and a rock had bested the greatest minds of the Empire. Elara descended from the command platform. She walked toward Ronin, the crowd parting for her like the Red Sea. The bioluminescence on her skin was radiant now, pulsing in a rapid, joyous rhythm that illuminated her features. She stopped in front of him. The massive engine hummed behind them, a backdrop of infinite power. "You fixed it," she said, her voice filled with wonder and something softer, something warmer. "With a hammer?" Ronin shrugged, slipping the tool back into the loop on his belt. "Percussive maintenance," he said with a grin. "It's a technical term back on Earth. Sometimes things just need to know who's boss. You treat the machine like it's fragile. It acts fragile. You treat it like it's got a job to do. It gets to work." Elara laughed. It was a sound Ronin had never heard from a Krellian. Unrestrained, musical, and alive. She reached out, her long, cool fingers brushing against his rough, scarred hand. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through him that had nothing to do with the engine. Her skin felt like cool glass, but beneath it, he could feel the warmth of her blood, the life force of a being who had just been unburdened. "You are a chaotic variable, Ronin," she murmured, stepping closer into his personal space. "And I find myself intrigued by your chaos." "Careful, Your Highness," Ronin grinned, feeling the heat rise in his cheeks. "Chaos is contagious. Hang around me too long, and you might start fixing things with duct tape and bad language." "I hope so," she replied, her violet eyes sparkling. The distance between them vanished. The arrogance of the Krellian Empire melted away, leaving only a woman impressed by a man who saw the world differently. "My father, the Emperor, will want to meet you. He will want to know the secret of the hammer." "Tell him it's not the hammer," Ronin said softly. "It's the hand that holds it." Just as the moment seemed to stretch into something more intimate, something deeper that could rewrite the diplomatic relations between their species, Vrak stormed over. He looked diminished, small, but his pride was still venomous. "This proves nothing," Vrak snarled, though his voice lacked its usual bite. "It was a fluke, a statistical anomaly. The engine would have started eventually. The human merely struck it at the serendipitous moment." Elara turned to him, her hand still resting on Ronin's arm. Her gaze was ice cold, the command returning to her posture. "The engine waited 100 years for a touch of humanity, Vrak. Do not insult our savior, or you will find yourself reassigned to waste reclamation on the prison moon of Targus. Do I make myself clear?" Vrak paled, his eyes darting between the glowing engine and the human mechanic. He swallowed hard, bowed stiffly, and scurried away into the shadows of the machinery. Ronin looked at Elara impressed. "So, about that payment, or maybe a tour of the rest of the ship? I bet there are a lot of things around here that are too tight." Alara's eyes sparkled with mischief. "I believe there is much we can discuss, Ronin. The engine is just the beginning, and I have many questions about this. Percussive maintenance." Ronin didn't just fix an engine that day. He broke the stagnation of an entire empire. He proved that while the Krellians had the technology to reach the stars, they had forgotten how to touch them. It took a human with a beat-up hammer and a gut feeling to remind them that perfection is the enemy of progress. But the story of Ronin and Elara doesn't end in the engine room. In fact, their journey and the mysteries of the Aethelgard is just heating up. The galaxy is full of broken things, and they are just getting started. If you want to see what happens when human intuition meets alien aristocracy, and how a simple mechanic became the most important man in the galaxy, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Because out here in the void, the only thing more dangerous than a broken engine is a human who knows how to fix it. Later that cycle, Ronin sat in the observation lounge. looking out at the nebula they were finally passing. The ship felt alive now. He could feel the vibration of the drive through the floor, a steady, powerful rhythm that matched his own heartbeat. Elara sat beside him. She wasn't wearing her formal robes anymore. She wore a simple tunic, more practical, more human. The tension of the last century was gone from her face. "My father wants to meet you," she said, watching the stars streak by in trails of light. "The Emperor is perplexed." Ronin laughed, taking a sip of the synthesized coffee that tasted vaguely of motor oil and burnt hazelnut. "Great. Does he have a broken toaster? Because I charge double for royalty." Elara leaned her head on his shoulder. It was a gesture of shocking intimacy for her species, a public declaration of a bond formed in the heat of the core. "No, he wants to know how you knew where to strike. Our scientists are already writing papers on kinetic resonant realignment." Ronin looked at his hammer, resting on the table between them. It looked ordinary, mundane, yet it had done the impossible. "I didn't know," he admitted softly, turning to look at her. "I just listened. The universe talks to you, Elara. If you stop trying to tell it what to do. You guys spend so much time talking at the universe with your math, you forget to listen for the answer." "Teach me," she whispered, her hand finding his again. "Teach me to listen." Ronin took her hand, his rough thumb tracing the delicate glowing patterns on her skin. He felt the pulse of her life, the warmth of her spirit. Lesson 1, put away the calculator. Lesson 2, pick up the hammer. Lesson 3, don't be afraid to break a few rules. As the Aethelgard jumped to warp speed, blurring the stars into lines of infinite possibility, Ronin knew his life as a simple scavenger was over. He was part of the crew now, part of the legend. And looking at the alien woman who looked at him like he hung the moon, he realized he wouldn't trade his rusty hammer for all the gold in the Empire. Because sometimes, the smartest thing you can do is just hit it.